Thank you guys for joining us. I really want to give a big thank you to Jennifer and Lenny for offering to do this workshop back in the spring and then still committing to doing it for our faculty here this summer. So I'm going to go ahead and mute and turn it over to them, but thank you guys so much.
Thanks, Candace.
So I think Jennifer is pulling up the presentation that we're going to show. And so while she just moved. Okay. I thought she left and I got nervous. And so Pear Deck was a tool that I'd found, or Jennifer found, some of us found somewhere in the spring, where we were trying to replicate some of the things we might do in class online and asynchronously. So Pear Deck can be used both synchronously and asynchronously. And what attracted me to it at first was I use clickers quite a bit in class to sort of engage people in making sure that they're thinking as we're working through material. And this was a way to do that and while giving them the information asynchronously. And so I had a whole bunch of students who had terrible internet this spring, and so wanted to limit the amount of video that I was doing. And so what I did was actually typed into slides what I would do if I were doing lecture in class. And then punctuated them with these interactive slides that if you did the asynchronous thing, that was the first class that I did online with students, and sort of getting an idea for where they are and how they were doing with different class stuff. And so there's an instructor-based mode as well, and that's what we were going to use today in class, and that's what today here now. And so that's what Jennifer is pulling up. And so if you're able to do two screens and want to play along as we're going through, you'd go to joinpd.com and enter that code, which always has this wonderful catchphrase with it. And so
can you guys see the screen?
I can at least see the screen. And so we'll give a minute or two for people to log in.
You can also do it on your phone if you don't have another screen on your computer.
That won't always be the code. It changes per session. And so it's a unique code just for your class that you're running at that time.
Did somebody ask that in the chat? I can't see the chat.
Yes, Lori asked that in the chat.
Okay. Oh yeah, it's a different code every single time.
All right, I seem to have, I'm stupid and I don't understand what's going on here.
David, do you have?
I see the screen you shared. Now, what am I doing? It says waiting for students to.
So right now you're waiting until I decide that we have enough students going. I don't know if more people are going to join.
Oh, so I don't have to log in on this.
You don't have to log in. If you log in, you get to participate in the questions we're going to ask.
All right, I'm just gonna watch then.
Okay.
And can I just add, I logged in and it wanted, because I'm using my phone to log in, and it wanted my Microsoft info, so I had to sign in. So I think that's just how Jennifer and Lenny have it set up.
Right, it's using your Center College single sign-on. That way we could tell who participated. Yeah, the code is these letters W, H, D, T, C that are giant in the middle of the screen.
And so the idea with having people log in is that this then tracks it back to the individual students so that you can keep track of who's participating and who's not. All right, should we move forward? I think
so
if we start the class, the code still stays on the slide.
And if not, it will still be on the chat. I think
True.
I think you're right. It will still be on the slide.
And so there are 11 of us, 12 of us connected now.
And can you see at the top the code is still up there? So if somebody loses their connection or comes in late and they want to join, they can come in and go, oh, Pear Deck, here's how I join. So if you practice the one, if you went through the Pear Deck that Lenny sent, then you've seen one that was done asynchronously. That was with Google Slides. This one is with PowerPoint. There's not any real difference other than they're both available, but not both simultaneously. So you should pick one and stick with the one that you're planning to use.
And so if you're participating as a student on your student screen, so where I know at least David isn't participating, on your student screen, this would pop up with options, radio buttons to choose one of those 4 ideas. And so respond to those now if you've got it.
One thing that's weird is I can't tell how many people have responded.
The lower, Jennifer, lower left of that screen.
Oh, 8 of 13. Thank you, Lenny.
Okay, I'm trying, do I press on the actual answer or?
On the right-hand side, you want to click it's like a radio button in a survey, right? So on the right-hand side, it says PowerPoint, Google Slides, Prezi, and if you click on one of those circles, it should appear as a black dot.
And then I had a question about using this. All the student has to do is press their choice. There isn't any submit or anything like that. Once they press it or enter their text answer or whatever, it goes to you.
Yes.
That's correct. And with the asynchronous route, they can move forward and backward. And so they can go forward and go back and change their answer and it re-records it. One of the things I did with all of the presentations, because it's not terribly clear when you get to the end that you're actually done, is a slide that says, you're done, just go somewhere else. And that helped.
Yeah, good point. Good idea.
Students find that a little disconcerting. So, okay, there's a strong preference for PowerPoint. It's good we're using it today. This is a question that you just type your answer. Okay, so I said you can't do synchronous and asynchronous. If I said it that way, I was wrong. What I meant was, if you're going to use Google Slides, you should use Google Slides all semester long. If you're going to use PowerPoint, you should use PowerPoint all semester long, because when you go to look at your session data from when students answered questions before, if you're using Google Slides, it will let you see your Google Slides session data. But if you switch to PowerPoint, then like your data from the Google Slides sessions, they're all gone. Does that make sense, Lucas? The pair code is WHDTC. Okay, so I could see that most people answered, and we can see their answers, but not until I tell it to show the answers. And so, and people can put more than one answer. So sometimes you'll see 15 answers or 17 answers for 14 people if they decide to answer more than one time.
And so one of the other things that you're like, somebody was editing their answer And so this actually shows up in real time, which we didn't realize because we hadn't used it synchronous. So when we were practicing, I could picture using this in some different ways where you're trying to collect word feedback in real time for the whole class to see this could actually work, because it pops everything up at once.
Where do the answers go?
Oh, that's a great
They
question.
go into a spreadsheet. When you use Google Slides, they go into a Google spreadsheet. I don't know where they go when you use PowerPoint, so I'll try to figure that out. And I will tell you later when I figure it out.
Well, I'm seeing all the answers here. How are you guys accessing?
So that's on a, Lori, that's a so you're seeing the student version. This is the teacher version. And so the idea is the students, if you're doing this synchronously, could all have the student version on their screen.
Okay.
And you might be projecting this at the front of a class. On the back end, if you're doing asynchronous, it drops. And even if you're doing synchronous, it will drop it all into a spreadsheet so you can review it after the class is over.
Joe, yes, as far as we can tell, the answers are always anonymous. Probably the teacher can figure out who said something from the spreadsheet later. So if you have people that are being disruptive and rude, then you can call them out outside of class, but you won't know it during class. So this one you can type or you can draw on the slide. And I just wanted you to have a chance to see what it looks like to draw on the slides. You might not care about drawing, but organic chemists care about drawing a lot. So we that's my first thing. You could tell if I've been on a whiteboard is I go in there and I draw a hexagon. So if you want to see multiple people's answers, then you have to scroll through. They don't show up all in the same place like they did with the whiteboards. I'm not used to using this synchronously, so if I'm, yeah. So this is an add-on. You can use it with Google Slides and you can use it with PowerPoint. The Google Slides one has existed longer, which means there's probably more features and it's probably less glitchy. If you're going to use PowerPoint, you can't use the PowerPoint that's built into your computer that you normally use. You have to use the PowerPoint Online, the Office 365 version, in order to see the Pear Deck add-on.
Although you can create, like if you already have your PowerPoints created, you can upload those both to Google Slides and you can open it in the online version and add Pear Deck to it, right? So this spring, I had a lot of my slides pre-prepared from prior semesters. I uploaded those slides to Google Slides. There were some conversion issues, which probably I should have just used the online PowerPoint. But beyond that, it was mostly there, and then I could just add the interactivity to the slides that used to be clickers. And so it made it relatively easy to change.
And that's part of why the answers are in some cases like duplications. So when it's a multiple choice question, if we have it there in the text with bullets, the multiple choice options, then you have to type it somewhere else in order for Pear Deck to present those as options that the students can choose. And so that's why Lori was like, do I pick the one on the left? Do I pick the one on the right? So there's some other kinds of questions that we have figured out how to ask using drawing or text. And so here's one that I kind of liked because I wanted, my students were asking, how can I figure out what these different things are? And so I wanted to do matching, but there wasn't matching. And so I made up my own matching. And students found it handy. So it says draw, so you can draw, but whenever it says draw, you can also type. So you might find it more handy to type. It's going to depend on what kind of device you're using. And so this person is using the drawing to like draw lines crossing the ways. And that person is doing the same thing. This person is typing, cool, in a different way. Nobody has used the way that I found intuitive, even though my students did it this way. Maybe I gave them a different example. I typed the little numbers 1, 2, 3, 4 underneath the context. So.
And so one of the things that I've really liked about the drawing tool in some of my science classes, I've been using something called Nearpod, which is similar in a way to Pear Deck, but they didn't offer the asynchronous stuff for free, where Pear Deck in the spring did. It's paid in the fall. Is that there's a lot of ways where it helps students draw out misconceptions, and so they come up with a lot of good wrong answers in a way that Clickers doesn't as much, right? I've got to come up with the wrong answers in Clickers. When we do these sort of free response types things, you get a lot of great wrong answers, and can talk through those and talk about why those are misconceptions. And that's one of the things I really like about this option for the slides.
Minor thing, but I see everybody's using the highlighter. That's why the line is so thick. If you just move over one square, it's a regular pen. Also, when I'm putting this in on my phone, I don't have to press enter or anything. I just, right. Okay.
So if you want, you can put web pages in. And so I put this thing, and you're allowed to like go look at Wikipedia. And so, yeah, you could go find something in Wikipedia, or some chemistry version of Wikipedia called ChemSpider. Really, you don't have to put this in, because our students are college students and they pretty much know how to get another window in their browser, but you know, they might, whatever. So it might not be a search engine that you're pointing to. Okay, Lenny.
And so I use this in the spring to do asynchronous, because I had students sort of all over the place, various internet capabilities, a lot of not great internet, a lot of special situations where they were, you know, basically they're caregivers for their siblings while their parents were frontline workers, and so they were only able to work in midnight. And so I decided for my students going asynchronous was best. And so because of the internet problems, I also tried to limit video. And so what I did was, you can very easily in Google Slides embed YouTube videos. And so you basically just put the link in, and they pop in. And so I'd put in short 3 or 4 minute videos, but then supplement that with what I would normally say in class as text. It's all student paced, so they can press the forward or back button as they wanted to. That's both good and bad, right? It's good in that they can explore the material in the way that they want to explore the material. It's bad in that it could influence feedback. So what I figured out worked really well was telling them the reason I was putting these questions in wasn't to grade them. It wasn't to assess whether well, it was to assess whether they understood it or not, but it was more to get feedback from them. And so I didn't care if they got all the answers correct while they were working through it. I actually wanted to see what their initial answer was. And so I made that really clear. They got graded just on participation. If they went through the Pear Deck and they completed it and they did all the interactive slides, they got the points. So that meant that what happened is, as they would move through the slides, they would answer a multiple choice question. And then on the next slide, I would tell them what the right answer was, to sort of get them thinking about it on their own, but then resolve the problem on that next slide. And that's similar to the way I use clickers in class. I ask clickers to find out if we're all on the same page, and if we're not, I'd have them engage with the material together in groups to try and clear up misunderstandings and then talk about it. And so I made it clear to them that I didn't want them to move forward and then go back to their prior answer and say, I answered this one wrong, I'm going to answer it correctly. And so that sort of tells them what they know is correct. And then I followed up with that. I used forums on Moodle to help if they were still unclear why the answer was what the answer was, that they could use that to clear it up. I see Lucas's question, and as far as I know, there's no way to lock the answers, that they can go back and sort of respond to it as many times as they want.
When you're doing it synchronously, there is a way to lock the answers. On asynchronous, you could just say no more change. You like on the place where it says hide responses, there's also a place that says lock responses, and then the student displays change to something like your teacher locked this, and so they can't go forward and backward if you're doing it in synchronous mode. They have to go out. They're on the same slide where you are, and they can't go back and change their answers.
And so I really look at this more as like a formative assessment kind of thing rather than a summative. It definitely works better in that mode. One of the things that I became aware of it pretty quickly was that, I'm pretty good at screwing up my slides when I first put them out there. And the sessions don't update after you make edits. So if you go into PowerPoint or you go into Google Slides and you set up your PowerPoint and you realize, oh shoot, this is all wrong, I need to go fix that. If you make that edit, the next time a student logs into that same asynchronous presentation, they see the old slides. You have to start a new session in order to correct anything that you realize you got wrong. So, my overachievers that I would post a slide and they'd be done with it an hour later, right? They would tell me, oh, Dr. Demeranville, you said X and isn't it Y? And I realized that, yes, it is Y. I shouldn't have put that slide together at 10 o'clock last night when I was half asleep. Right? I would have to go in, make the changes in the slides, and then start a new session and give the students that link. And since I was doing it all through Moodle, they didn't necessarily know that that it was a different link, but you have to give them a different link. The other thing is that once you're done, you close a session, and there are a number of things you can't do until you close a session, like download the spreadsheet, with all the answers in it, right? And so you have to close a session in order to get that. The flip side of that is that once you close a session, the students can no longer see that session. You can send them a copy of their answers, but they can't see that session. And so there are multiple options then for making sure that they have all that information. I provided them a link to my Google Drive where I had all these slides, so they had view access, and they could just go in and view those old slides at any time. That's similar to what I do in class, where after class I post PDFs of any slides that I've used. And so you need to think about ways around that. We wanted to show a little bit about what the instructor feedback looks like. Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. And so in the asynchronous presentation, one of the things we asked you to do was to rate on a scale of 1 to 10 how good you're feeling about the idea of online learning. I didn't check to see who's an 11, but I feel like I need to find out who that is because they're inspiring to me. But this is one way, other than the downloaded spreadsheet, to get a quick view of where people are at. As a class today, we're sitting at about a 6 on average, right? And you can see the spread of the data. And so that just sort of gives you some instant feedback on where people are at with different answers. We'll go ahead to the next one. We saw the multiple choice data earlier in this presentation, but this can get that same data from the presenter or from the instructor view after you've closed a session as well. This is not our data. This is actually my SpringNet data where I asked students to drag that icon around. And so if you did the asynchronous presentation, it turns out that we're all pretty good at telling us where Kentucky is, and almost all of us are in Kentucky. And so I thought I'd show this data from the spring that showed my class was spread out across the United States, but gave me a at a glance view of where that is. Go ahead to the next slide. I wasn't going to show this, but when I looked at our data about drawing a face to express how you're feeling, I realized that most of the time I was getting faces like on the left, but actually the face on the right is sort of elaborate. And so you can actually do some more elaborate drawings if you're talented enough, I think, to do that. And so I thought I'd show that in case that was useful too. Go ahead to the next slide. And so then the other thing I wanted to mention, the beginning of this is where we were before, but downloading and uploading grades is really easy. So downloading an Excel spreadsheet with all of the students whose answer is there, you get all of the answers, you get all of the students, and it's like 2 clicks in the Pear Deck interface to get that. And then what I would do, because I was grading on participation, is I'd go in, add a column, give them all 10 points if they'd responded. And then it's really easy to upload that spreadsheet to Moodle if you use Moodle's gradebook. And it you have to, it's 2 or 3 clicks, but you have to tell it which column the grade is in and which column the name is in. And it maps it to the students automatically. And there were really no glitches once Christy and I figured out how to do that. And so it was actually far easier on the grading side to me than using turning point clickers. And so it was really simple in that way. And so that's sort of the how do we use it and what does it look like thing. Maybe we can pause there and ask if you've got questions about that, and then we can also show how to set up a Pear Deck too, if that,
I'm going
that
to
is
end
of
this,
interest.
and I think it'll ask me about saving the session. So people might want to see that, right?
Sure, yeah. So while Jennifer's typing that in, one of the things that is important with the grading is that students use their center email to do that. If they use a Gmail account, that does encounter problems. So that took a little bit of training with students.
So when you are building the PowerPoint and setting up a Pear Deck, so you can see this looks pretty much like a Pear Deck. And then some of the questions have this little banner on the bottom. What I'll do is insert a new slide. And then you put your question on there and whatever you're going to do. And then up here at the top, there's the more options. You pick that, and at the bottom, you'll find Pear Deck. You need to set up an account on Pear Deck before you're going to automatically see that. And so then the Pear Deck thing, yeah.
So we paid for R&D for Pear Deck for the year, and it will work with your Google Apps, your center email with Google Apps. So if you want to use Google Slides, or with your Microsoft account, so your center email. So you just log into OneDrive, Office 365 through CenterNet with your center email and stuff. And then if you create a new PowerPoint slide, Pear Deck should already be installed as the add-on.
Cool, thank you. So because it was free in the spring because of COVID, it's not going to be free in the future. So you got to see questions about text and choice and number and website and draw and draggable. Another one that I like to do is I think it's this one. So like, oh, I didn't realize it was going to open this. No, I don't want that. Critical thinking templates. So on the Google Slides, there's one where you could say, okay, tell us what was the biggest thing you learned today, or what do you still have a question about? And my students, I grade like Linny does, which is like, oh yeah, you answered it, you get points. And sometimes I would ask a question that would be like, oh, here, it would be two things. I would usually change the words because I don't necessarily want the same words that they used here, but like, look, there's two things. And then there was one I like to use, and there was 4 things. And on the 4 things one of my students one time was like, do we have to answer all 4? Because they're sort of the same. And I'm like, dude, answer as many as you feel like it. And so this is a place for you to say, what do you still have questions about? And what do you, so somebody wants to know how I got there. I went over here to the, our template library, explore and add pre-made content to your session. I didn't know it was going to do this. On Google Slides, there's a few slides at the bottom, and it will just like add a slide into your PowerPoint. So that is the behavior I was expecting to happen rather than these. And I think if I like pick one of these and I want to use it, maybe I copy it.
Yeah, this is, I didn't realize I was looking at Google Docs, and it is much more intuitive for these on Google Docs.
Yeah.
And can I interject? Because I've had a few other faculty try Pear Deck, right, within PowerPoint Online. So the add-on should be there for everyone. ITS had to enable that. But I think it's easier with PowerPoint to go and do a new Pear Deck first. And of course, I didn't use any of the templates. And then you can go in and add your other slides, where Google you can disperse between both. So just from my experiences with PowerPoint Online.
So then when you're ready to present it, you just click present with Pear Deck, and then you saw the other parts that happened. Did that help, Joe, in setting up a Pear Deck?
Jennifer, why don't you actually go in and just do a new slide completely so you can see what it looks like from start to finish. I think that might be helpful.
Okay.
It took me a while to figure out how to do it when I did it.
Sarah, I see your question about better to log into 365 or Google Apps initially, and I think it depends on whether you want to use PowerPoint or Google Drive or Google Slides. You want to log into whichever one you're planning to use, and I think there are benefits and drawbacks to both. I used Google Slides all spring, and so I'm more familiar with that, and I'm not sure if I am qualified to say which is better yet.
So do you want a whole new PowerPoint instead of just a new slide?
Yeah, I think I want to interject 2 things. Yeah, I think showed how to do a new PowerPoint. So can you maybe go take it even a step further back so you're back at OneDrive for a second? And while you're doing that, to answer Sarah's question, Pear Deck has a lot, and like Jennifer already said this, and Lenny did too in the opening, they have a lot more support. Everything's more seamless, especially if you want to incorporate a video with Google Slides versus PowerPoint Online. So, I mean, I think it's up to you all, like what platform is going to be better for you, but they have more support, and all the kinks are kind of worked out more in Google than they are in the PowerPoint Online.
I agree with that, Candace, because I've played with both of these for 2 different things. But my struggle with the Google Slides, I wanted to use a lot of videos, and that was so easy in that. But I couldn't reproduce how I actually got the add-in into Google. I struggled. I'm a fairly tech savvy person, and I struggled to do that. And I honestly couldn't reproduce it if somebody asked me to. So and I'm sure I was logged into my center account. Is there a simple explanation for what I was probably doing wrong?
So ITS in the spring, we were pretty much using Google. All of our faculty, Lenny, Jennifer, all the chemistry faculty that were using it. And they enabled it only for Google. If you manually went in, it may have disappeared, right? But IT has enabled it both for Google and PowerPoint, Microsoft. So I know Jennifer showed you click those 3 little dots, and I'll do a quick summary too, where I'll show that. But in Google, it should be, if you go to add-ons, it should already be enabled universally. If you're logged into Center's Google. If you're not, you have to add the add-on. So
awesome. That's probably what it was. I probably thought I was struggling, but really I did nothing and it was there already. Okay, great. Thanks.
And so when Jennifer's going through adding a multiple choice slide or in PowerPoint, I can show you what Google Drives looks like as well. I'm logged in there.
Okay, I'm going to ask one more question and then hand it back to Lenny.
So guys, if I understand right, you link each slide with Pear Deck. Is that the case? So it's actually, you're actually running a presentation, right? And then
yes,
slides in your presentation then are Pear Deck equipped.
Yeah,
that's correct. Yes. Yeah. So
okay, because that wasn't clear to me. So in a sense, Pear Deck just works with whatever presentation software you're going to choose.
And not every slide needs to be a Pear Deck slide.
Right. Okay. Gotcha. Now I understand.
It always has that little thing down at the bottom telling you, is this a text? Is it a multiple choice? Is it a draggable? Jennifer, can you have more than one thing per slide? Like, could you have a draggable and a multiple choice on one slide, or is it just one thing per slide?
That's one thing. And I've tried to do a matching using draggables, but you aren't really allowed to have, you can have more than one different draggable, but you don't have as many draggables as I wanted. So.
Okay.
So this is, I'm in a Google Drive, and this is where I made my Pear Decks this spring. And so if you create a new presentation, right, I could type something in this slide and have it not be Pear Deck oriented. And if I add a new slide, I want to ask a question, you go to add-ons and Pear Deck and open add-ons, and you get these options for what question you want to ask, right? And so if you do a multiple choice, it then has you put in your different options. It remembers because it's good at that. And so this takes a second, and here I don't have the ABC on the screen because I didn't type those in. This would show up with that in the student view with that sidebar on the side. Functionally, what I actually did was go to File and maybe Insert. Now I'm not remembering how I did this. That's a good thing. It's been too long since I did this to remember. There's a way to, import slide. If you go to File and Import Slides, you can import your actual PowerPoint that you already had prepared from, 3 semesters ago to do that. And then you can edit those slides that you import according to adding you know, what you want. And let's see, the other, I was going to say something else. Oh yeah. And so somebody mentioned how easy it is to do video, which I used a lot of. If you go to insert a video and you have a favorite YouTube video, you just enter that here and it goes in. Let's see if this pops up. And so I want that video, I select it, and there it is. And now students can just press play and watch that video as it goes. Lori asked where the answers went. And so in the instructor view, they're down here in the comments section. You could type them on the slide if you wanted to. And students, when it's in student view, it would pop up as that side screen where the radio buttons were. Do you know if this integrates with Ensemble, Candace?
I was just answering that. I think you can use the link, but I don't think you can do an embed frame, like the iframe, copy the code and embed it. I'll do some testing on that. Oh, Christy says she already did. So maybe she wants to add something to that.
Sarah, I don't know if it's easy to toggle between instructor and student.
I don't think it is.
I don't think it is. I think you either view it as an instructor or view it as a student. And so then the other thing that's on the back end, oh, why have I been logged out? Let's try this again. This is where once you start a session, which in Google Slides is similar to what you would see in you click this start lesson and you get the option of whether you want to make it a student-paced activity or an instructor-paced activity. Once that's going on, you get this view in Pear Deck. So you log into Pear Deck and you click on sessions. And this gives you all the sessions that you're running. And so you can see it. This is the classroom view that Jennifer was showing earlier, but is this the one? Yeah, this is the one that we were working on. You can also see in the feedback. So this is the one that we did. And so this was the asynchronous one before class. You can see that, I won't embarrass them by pointing out who this is, but somebody started the asynchronous one and only got to slide 1 and quit. And then, let's see, this one was a multiple choice question. And so you see those multiple choice. And if you scroll over it, you can also see who answered what on those questions as the instructor. So Joe was asking about anonymity. You don't see this on the live view, but you can see it behind the scenes. And then the other thing you can do is, once it reloads my sessions here, once you have closed a session, which you do by coming over here and ending the session, you can send students takeaways and they give all of their information to, like, they get all of their answers in the slides by email. And you can also export to spreadsheet, and that downloads all the students' responses by spreadsheet. And so that's sort of on the back end how you handle it as an instructor and get the information out.
Lenny, I figured out why you got logged out.
Okay.
It's because yesterday you were trying to look at good results from the PowerPoint side.
Right.
So then all of your sessions from the Google side are gone.
Right. Yeah. So that's sort of the back end. And I had done a quick video sometime in the spring that's somewhere on the CTL website of how to do the basic setup, the basic steps of getting Pear Deck to work with Google Slides. And I think I did the closing the session and the downloading of the data piece as well. And so that's somewhere in CTL's
I'll make
library.
sure it's on one of our posts, but I'll add it under the summary page where the live recording is going to be available, but I'll send that out as well. So.
Thanks, Candace. There's not a way for students to know that they were submitted. And so what I started doing was like in the asynchronous class that you saw at the end of every presentation, I just copied and put in a slide that said your answers will be recorded, close this tab, navigate away. And so that way you could they felt better when I told them they were submitted. Somehow they didn't distinguish the fact that I was typing that in and not the program. And that was fine with them. And I had no problems with people that actually went through it, having it actually record their answers. They can also log in, do part of it asynchronously, and then come back to it so that if the session gets broken for whatever reason, they don't have to start from scratch. It will remember where they were and they can come back at some other time.
One thing I had trouble with one of my students. So there's one thing it would be like, share the takeaways with the students. I don't see the option to share the takeaways from the PowerPoint that I did. So I don't know if that's because it doesn't exist with PowerPoint, but one of my students, her takeaways, about half her answers were blank. So she was always worried that I couldn't see her answers. And I'm like, yeah, I could see your answers. I don't know why your takeaways are blank. And so maybe they just disabled the takeaways because they couldn't figure out how to keep them from being glitchy.
I have a quick question. Let's say you put together a PowerPoint presentation and you have one slide in there where you're using Pear Deck. Mm-hmm. Will then that automatically create a session? So then you go into Pear Deck and you log into Pear Deck and you're going to see that as a session. Is that
correct? Yeah, as long as you have started it as a Pear Deck, right?
Okay.
So you have to tell it to start a session. But that's the only way you can get the interactivity as well, right?
Right.
And so yes, a single slide generates a session.
Okay.
And you could have multiple sessions with the same set of slides. Like Mark Galadowicz was asking, can you do it synchronously and asynchronously? You could start a session for your synchronous students and start another session for your asynchronous students, and they're all using the same slides. And they can have separate names when you end the two different sessions. And they'll be in separate places.
Right. The asynchronous presentation that you guys did before this session this morning is something I've used now. I don't know, probably I have a dozen of those. I just keep reusing it for various purposes, and each one is a different session.
To do that, do you just save it? Save it as a different file? Or
no, you just go in and start a new session, right? So every time you click that start a session on, so let me.
Oh, right, because you got to start it to make it live. You got to click
right
to make it live. Okay.
And that generates a different link, right? So share screen.
And then you would just copy that link and put it on Moodle. There.
That's what I did, right? Yeah.
Okay,
so if I go to add-ons and open Pear Deck add-on, right? I start a lesson and I tell it student paste, and it will give me someday. It's working hard. It gives me this link, and so I would just copy that link and put that link on Moodle for the day. And so
and then sorry, go ahead, Lenny, I'm sorry.
It's a series of gibberish, but if I wanted to, I wouldn't do this, but I was teaching 2 sections of that side of the spring. If I wanted one section to use that link, I could come back in and start another lesson, and make it, or I guess if in the spring or this fall, if I wanted to do one in person and one asynchronous, well, it's doing that. Right, this link is like TXKQ, and this link is completely different, right? And so you can have both of those going. And if I were to go back to my Pear Deck, I'd now see, ignore. If I refresh this page, I'll probably now see the 2 new sessions that I just, right. So there's my student pay session that I created, right? And the live session that I created. And so those are both there as 2 separate sessions.
And so when students open these up, they've got to put in that code.
If you're doing it live, right? If you're doing it live, if you're doing it asynchronous, they just click on the link and it brings
it just opens up like a regular
just opens
PowerPoint.
Yeah, right.
All right, and then if you've already got a presentation put together already, and you say turn some of those existing slides into Pear Deck. As soon as you hit that, there's a new link.
That's right.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, and so I mean, it was super easy to convert stuff this spring that I already had slides for, because I just uploaded those slides, tweaked a few formatting changes, typed in the words that I would normally say, and sent it off into the ether for them to see. Other questions or thoughts, comments?
Where's the button for start session?
It's in the add-on.
Let's present with Pear Deck. It's at the top of the Pear Deck window in the tab.
The green arrow, right?
Right. So if I'm back here, in that, actually, I guess in Google Slides, it stays even if you use the scroll bar. It's this green arrow that says start lesson.
You start the session after you've put it all together.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. And so this presentation, you can sort of see what I did where I typed a lot more into the slides than I would normally have into the slides, because I wasn't there to narrate them, and I was trying to stay away from a lot of internet heavy video. And so those first few slides are description, and then they'd get to this slide and say they had to choose an option and had the multiple choice options. And then this one reviews that answer, and then they go on to the next answer or the next option that they'd choose. And so once all those were in, then I'd press start lesson to get it going.
Okay.
What are some of the challenges that you think you might run into if you're trying to do this synchronously? Because both of you are presenting asynchronous models right now.
So in the past, Lenny and I both used Nearpod, and we did that exclusively synchronously. And so this is analogous to that. Problems that you might have would be like, oh, if you're in a classroom and the internet goes out or somebody's device drops, then it can be hard for them to get back and rejoin. Those are the only things that I can think of that would be a problem. But that would be a problem. Like I had a student this spring whose power was out at her house for 48 hours. And somebody else whose internet was out for, I don't know, 10 or 12 hours. And so those are the things that I would worry about students being able to participate is disrupted because of power or internet connections.
The first day is always a little bit of a challenge. I forget who made the note earlier today. I think it was Lori mentioned that on the drawing slide, you have different drawing tools, and they're pretty intuitive, but they take a little while to get used to, right? And so that first day, there's some coaching about which tool you use, and that those options are there. And some of that self-discovery, somebody goes, oh, I can make the pen choice, I can make the pen smaller, and half the class hears them exclaim that as they're doing it, right? And they figure that out. That actually may be easier in person than it was online, because you actually sort of encounter that stuff in person and can correct it, or help them figure it out. Whereas doing it asynchronous, I sort of said, here's the document to start with, try this stuff, and let me know if you have problems. And for the most part, I just didn't hear anything back. And so I sort of hoped that they weren't having problems. And then, 2 months later, sometimes I found out they'd had a problem the whole time, and somehow they were making it work.
Would you use this in place of clickers?
Yes.
Yeah, I think I would.
So they would all have to have some kind of a device.
Yeah, maybe I wouldn't. So a few years ago, what's that?
Can I add something though?
Sure.
Like with the clickers, you pretty much have to use one of the clicker devices. So they won't work. They did what Pear Deck did, where it let you do it for free on a mobile device, but we don't have licenses for mobile. So if we're doing hybrid, you have some students remote, some students in the classroom, you wouldn't be able to use the clickers because the students wouldn't be able, they're not physically there. Where you'd have to have at least with Pear Deck, you can use a computer, some type of device, a mobile device or a laptop that would work. So that's where I kind of see like the pros and cons versus the two, just with the licensing that we have.
Yeah, and you would just have to be sure that, like if you were doing it synchronously, you would have to be aware that, some people might be on their phone, and therefore like some of the drawing tasks might be more difficult, but just entering text or selecting a radio button, that shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, my students liked the drawing very much because they couldn't make the molecules beautiful. And so I tended to not use drawing as much as I anticipated that I would.
And one of the things that I thought I'd be all in for bring your own device a few years ago, I use Young 110, and it's so technologically advanced that clickers don't work in there. And so we tested a bring your own device version of clickers, and I actually really didn't like it because I didn't think I'd be bothered by students having their devices out. But what I noticed is the students that were really good and had a system where they put their phone away and put it in their bag and ignored it, it was actually distracting to them to have their phone out because their notifications would roll through. And it was almost like I was causing them to be distracted, right? And I cared about that less for the students that would have had their phone out and had the notifications rolling through anyways, right? Like, I was less concerned because that's their choice. But when it was me forcing them to have their device out, and I would see them like take their phone out and do the answer and then like try and put it upside down and slide it under the desk so that they couldn't see it all. And then they'd like have to scramble when I brought a clicker in. There might be some coaching that's needed about how to turn notifications off and keep Wi-Fi on or something like that. To help those students so that they're not distracted by the device. Because I really felt bad that I was causing them to be distracted by their phones.
That's a really, really good point.
Yeah. I didn't feel bad for the ones that were distracted by their phones anyways. I felt bad for the ones I was causing to be distracted by their phones.
Well, it's 11 o'clock. I want to give a big thank you again to Lenny and Jennifer for presenting today. I'll be sending out an email with the live recording and the link to the other resources that they shared with us. So thank you all for coming. And if you have other questions, feel free to reach out to us.
Thanks, Candace.
Thanks.
Thanks.